Hidden in the Colorado desert stands a fortress many call the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Inside, some of America's most infamous prisoners spend nearly every waking hour locked behind solid concrete doors. No handshakes, no sunlight on their skin, no meaningful human contact, only silence, concrete, and time. This isn't legend. It's the reality of the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, ADX Florence. Opened in 1994 near Florence, Colorado, ADX was built after a series of violent incidents in other federal prisons, including the murder of 2 guards at USP Marion. Federal officials wanted a facility where the government could guarantee no more staff deaths, escapes, or large-scale riots. The answer was an administrative maximum prison designed from the ground up to neutralize risk through architecture and procedure. Every detail reflects that mission. Cells measure roughly 7 to 12 feet, about 2.1 to 3.6 ms, and are constructed almost entirely of reinforced concrete. There are no loose pipes or metal fixtures. Beds, desks, and stools are poured into the floor as single units. Windows are vertical slits about 4 inches wide, angled so a prisoner can see only the sky, not the surrounding compound or other inmates. Showers are on timers, sinks have recessed spouts, and toilets are engineered to prevent blockage or use as weapons. Even the door slots for meal trays are sized and hinged to limit contact. Security extends beyond the cell. Movement between areas is rare and tightly choreographed. When an inmate leaves his cell, for a legal visit, a medical appointment, or the small outdoor exercise pen, he is shackled and escorted by at least 2 officers. Many are housed under step-down or control unit programs where any out-of-cell activity happens alone. Cameras cover nearly every angle. Staff work from secure control rooms rather than walking the tiers. By 2018, according to the D.C. Corrections Information Council's inspection report, most prisoners spent 22 to 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. The report noted no meaningful human contact for many inmates, a phrase also echoed by federal court filings and human rights groups. Out-of-cell time may occur at unpredictable hours, sometimes in small wire mesh cages dubbed dog runs. Phone calls or visits, when allowed, are brief and highly monitored. This combination of design and policy has made ADX Florence both feared and controversial. Supporters in the Bureau of Prisons say it keeps staff and the public safe from the worst of the worst. Critics, including former wardens, psychologists, and civil rights lawyers, describe it as a laboratory of extreme isolation that can break a person's mind long before his sentence ends. For most men at ADX Florence, daily routine means very little movement but constant surveillance. A standard day begins and ends inside the same 7 by 12-foot concrete cell. Lights may stay on dimly through the night for security. Staff can see in through a small window in the steel door. Meals arrive through the slot 3 times a day on rigid trays. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner at set hours. Prisoners slide the tray back when finished. Utensils are plastic and counted. Exercise is the one scheduled break, but even that is usually solitary. According to the 2018 D.C. inspection report, many prisoners are escorted in restraints to a narrow outdoor pen, sometimes called a dog run, enclosed by tall concrete walls and wire mesh overhead. It is roughly the length of a single-car garage. No grass, no shared recreation yard. Inmates see only sky and walls. Sessions last about an hour and can occur at any time of day or night, depending on staff availability. Showers are on timers inside specially designed stalls, often in cell or in adjacent secure booths. Water runs for a fixed interval. There are no exposed taps. Toilets and sinks are combined units with built-in controls to limit misuse. Even reading materials and personal property are restricted and inspected. Books and legal papers come through mail only after screening. Human contact is minimal by design. Conversations with other prisoners happen only by shouting through vents or across corridors. Staff interaction is brief and procedural. Meal delivery, medical checks, escorts. Phone calls to family are limited, monitored, and scheduled. Contact visits are almost unheard of. Many prisoners speak of months without touching another person's hand. This intense isolation is part of the facility's operational protocol. The Bureau of Prisons classifies ADX as administrative rather than disciplinary, meaning people are sent here not just for punishment, but because the government deems them too dangerous for other prisons. Some, like high-profile terrorists or organized crime leaders, have no realistic chance of leaving the control unit unless their security score changes dramatically. Psychologists and human rights groups have repeatedly warned about the mental toll of these conditions. Court filings in cases such as Bacote versus Federal Bureau of Prisons describe inmates developing severe depression, paranoia, or self-harm behaviors under near-total isolation. Yet the policy remains that strict separation prevents assaults, gang coordination, and escapes, priorities the Bureau says must come first. In short, a day at ADX Florence is not marked by clocks or activities, but by the unchanging rhythm of confinement, the same cell, the same silence, and for many, the same sense of disappearing from the world outside. When ADX Florence opened in 1994, the Federal Bureau of Prisons intended it for inmates considered too dangerous, too high profile, or too escape-prone for any other facility. Over the years, its roster has read like a cross-section of America's most notorious offenders. The idea is not to punish more harshly, but to prevent any chance of violence or coordination from inside prison walls. At least that's how the Bureau frames it. Among the first transfers were men involved in high-visibility attacks on the U.S. government and public. Ramzi Youssef, convicted for planning the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, is housed there under special administrative measures. Unabomber Ted Kaczynski spent years in the control unit before his death. Terry Nichols, co-conspirator in the Oklahoma City bombing, is there. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber, are also on the rolls. International crime bosses, cartel leaders, and contract killers have joined them over the decades. But ADX is not only for terrorists. It has also housed leaders of violent prison gangs, contract murderers who attacked guards, and serial escape artists. Thomas Silverstein, a member of the Aryan Brotherhood who killed 2 correctional officers, spent more than 30 years in extreme isolation before his death in 2019. Former mobster Vincent Bassiano was held under heavy restrictions while awaiting trial. Even spies such as Robert Hansen, the FBI agent who passed secrets to Moscow, ended up here before his 2023 death. Placement is determined by classification scores and administrative review. In theory, inmates can step down to less restrictive units or be transferred to other prisons after demonstrating years of compliance. In practice, critics say, the path out of ADX's most isolated cells can be murky and slow. Civil rights attorneys point to cases where prisoners with mental illness languished in solitary for years despite repeated appeals. The inmate mix has given ADX its mythic nickname, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Yet the reality is more controlled and less dramatic than Hollywood might imagine. No mass escape attempts, no open gang warfare. Instead, the drama is internal. Men living alone with their thoughts, their crimes, and the knowledge that the outside world goes on without them. This population profile is part of what makes the prison so controversial. Supporters argue that concentrating the worst of the worst in one hyper-secure facility protects staff and the public. Opponents argue it creates a warehouse of human suffering, where mental health declines under conditions few can imagine. Both sides agree on one fact. ADX Florence is unlike any other prison in the United States. ADX Florence is not just a prison with high walls. It is an environment engineered to control every sense. The compound covers 37 acres on the edge of Colorado's high desert, surrounded by double fences, razor wire, motion sensors, and patrol roads. Yet the real power lies inside. Each housing unit is arranged like a spoke off a central corridor, with cells facing inward and surveillance cameras covering every angle. Staff operate heavy doors remotely from secure control rooms, limiting direct contact with prisoners. Cells are built from poured concrete with smooth surfaces to prevent hiding contraband. Ventilation grills are tamper-proof. Windows are narrow and angled so prisoners can see only sky, cutting off sight lines to other inmates or the perimeter. Even the exercise pens are designed this way, open to sunlight but enclosed by concrete walls and chain-link roofs. Sound plays a role too. With thick walls and sealed doors, conversations do not easily travel from cell to cell. Prisoners describe a cotton-like silence, broken only by the hum of ventilation and the clang of food slots. This sensory depress, Vation is intentional. Officials believe it reduces tension and prevents communication between gang members, but psychologists note it can heighten anxiety and hallucinations. Every movement, meals, showers, medical care, phone calls, is scripted and monitored. Cameras and intercoms feed into the control center, where staff can react without physically entering the unit. This architecture allows ADX to run on fewer officers than a comparably dangerous open-tier prison, while maintaining far greater security. Supporters say this design has worked. Since opening, ADX has seen no successful escapes and very few serious assaults on staff. But the same layout that makes it secure also creates what some call a prison within a prison, an environment where normal social cues vanish and time loses meaning. By 2018, the DC Corrections Information Council and human rights groups were warning that the extreme isolation at ADX was producing a predictable toll. Court filings in Bacote versus Federal Bureau of Prisons and Silverstein versus Federal Bureau of Prisons documented cases of severe depression, psychosis, and self-harm. Former wardens, including some who helped design the facility, have since called for a re-evaluation of long-term solitary confinement. The Bureau of Prisons points to its step-down program, introduced in the 2010s, as evidence of reform. Inmates who demonstrate consistent good behavior can move from the most restrictive control unit to less isolated housing and eventually to other federal prisons. According to the BOP, hundreds of prisoners have stepped down successfully. Critics respond that the process is slow, opaque, and often unavailable to those with mental illness, the very group most harmed by isolation. International bodies have weighed in. In 2011, UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Juan Mendez, said prolonged solitary confinement beyond 15 days can constitute cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Lawsuits over conditions at ADX cite those findings. The European Court of Human Rights has scrutinized U.S. supermax prisons in extradition cases, examining whether life at ADX meets minimum human rights standards. Yet the facility continues to operate much as it was designed. For staff and nearby communities, it represents security and jobs. For families of victims and the public, it signals that the worst of the worst are locked away. For prisoners inside, it remains a daily test of mental endurance. More than a quarter century after opening, ADX Florence still embodies the debate over punishment and safety in America's federal system. Its concrete cells, timed showers, and window slits symbolize ultimate control. Supporters see it as essential. Critics see it as a monument to isolation. Either way, the Alcatraz of the Rockies stands as a stark reminder of what happens when a society chooses absolute security over human contact, and of the hidden world most Americans will never see.